The sky over Red Butte bled with the color of embers, as though the heavens themselves remembered too much violence and could not hide it. The windmill creaked in the distance, slow and tired, its rhythm like the pulse of an old man's heart. A crow circled above the desert floor, its shadow crossing over broken wagon wheels, over the bones of cattle half buried in the dust. Some said the West was dying in those years, its vastness closing in, its silence broken by the harshness of men who had run out of land to claim and excuses to give. I remember it clear as a scar, how the town of Red Butte stood small and crooked against that wide sky, a settlement clinging to survival, half proud and half afraid. People whispered of the last tribe in the hills, a people whose songs were fading like smoke, whose warriors no longer had enough brothers to bury their dead. And in those same whispers, you could hear another fear, that the land itself would not forgive what had been done here. Elias Crow came riding into town that evening, dust covering him like a second skin. He was a man the years had beaten thin, not by hunger, but by memory. Folks said he'd been part of skirmishes in the border country, where he had drawn his gun too quickly, too often, leaving him with blood on his conscience that not even whiskey could wash away. He rode alone, and the saloon doors, though open, did not welcome him. A hush traveled ahead of him, the kind of hush that tells a man his shadow has already arrived. Marietta Lane was there by the well, lifting buckets with careful hands. A widow, young yet with eyes already old, she bore the sharp edge of gossip wherever she went. Her husband had gone under the earth years back, a rancher swallowed by a storm he could not fight. Folks never said it kindly, but they wondered why she had lived when he had not. To some, survival itself was a stain. And in the hills, beyond the reach of the town's chatter, Chaska watched. He was one of the last of his people, a man carved by hunger and grief, but still unbroken. His tribe's fires burned fewer each winter, the circle of their children smaller. To see him standing on the ridges was to glimpse a ghost who refused to fade, his gaze steady, carrying the memory of generations the land itself seemed to mourn. Elias dismounted at the saloon, and though no one spat at his boots, the silence was a sharper insult. A few men muttered near the bar. "Crow brings death where he rides," one said. He ignored it. A man who has lived too long with shame learns to swallow it like stale bread, though it never fills him. Near the well, two cowhands cornered Marietta, laughing with the cruelty of idle men. Their words carried a sting of mockery, accusing her of loneliness she never asked for. Elias walked past them, his spurs biting the earth. He did not speak, just placed himself between their smirks and her quiet defiance. His eyes, hollow and unreadable, drove them back better than fists could. When it was done, he touched the brim of his hat and went on without a word. Marietta's thanks was nothing but a look, one that lingered after he was gone. Later, in the canyon, Elias found himself face to face with Chaska. No words, no noise but the rasp of their horse's breath. Elias' hand brushed the worn leather of his holster, and Chaska's bow was half raised. The air was tense enough to shiver the leaves. But nothing happened. Nothing but a moment of recognition between two men who understood what it meant to live on the edges of the world. When they parted, there was no trust, only a silence heavy with possibility. Word spread fast. Red Butte thrived on gossip as much as it did on cattle. Men in the saloon spoke of Crow being seen near the canyon, of a cowboy sharing breath with the last of the tribe. By nightfall, they had turned suspicion into certainty. When cattle went missing, the blame was already carved in stone. The Red Devils, one spat, and Crows with them. It came to a boil under the dim lanterns of the saloon. A mob of men, their mouths full of whiskey and fear, cornered Elias. "You ride with them. You betray your own," one accused. The room swelled with anger, torches already being prepared outside. Elias stood quiet, shoulders heavy, eyes refusing to rise to their fury. When he left, the insults followed him like stones thrown at his back. Marietta saw him pass by her small house on the edge of town, the torches flickering behind him. She stepped out into the dark, a clay pitcher in her hands, and offered him water for the road. She did not say a word. Her gesture was enough. His hand trembled just slightly as he took it, drinking like a man who had forgotten kindness could still exist. Elias rode out toward the canyon that night, the flames of the mob's torches painting the desert behind him. Above, the sky burned darker, as though it, too, awaited what violence the dawn would bring. The night did not end in silence. It broke open with the sound of hooves drumming the earth, of cattle scattering like frightened prayers across the valley. At dawn, smoke twisted skyward from a barn fire on the edge of Red Butte, and the town awoke with fury already burning in its throat. Men gathered in the square, with rifles slung, certain in their rage before truth ever had a chance to speak. The blame fell heavy, as it always did, upon the last tribe. Elias watched from the edge of it all, his heart a tight knot of shame and memory. He had seen such mornings before, the quick rush to hatred, the way men clung to it to feel righteous. He knew too well how blood once spilled could never be pulled back into the body. Marietta passed through the crowd, her shawl drawn tight, her eyes restless. She saw him standing apart, and for a moment thought he might turn away. But Elias stayed, shoulders set as though the weight of the whole town pressed down on them. By nightfall, the mob was ready to ride. Elias, torn between silence and duty, followed a different trail into the canyon. There he found Chaska waiting, the flames of a small fire casting his face in bronze shadows. They studied each other without words, as though deciding if trust could be built out of all the ruin between them. Finally, Chaska spoke, his voice low, measured. "It was not my people," he said. "The ones who burned your barns are outlaws, men with no fire, no home. They want blood spilled so none can tell the difference between thief and tribe." Elias listened, but listening came at a cost. Memory dragged him back to another night, another raid. He had fired too quickly then, cut down figures in the smoke that later proved to be women, not warriors. His voice was gravel when it came. "My hands aren't clean, Chaska. I have killed those who didn't deserve it." Chaska did not flinch. "Then live in a way that gives peace to their spirits. If your shadow is heavy, carry it to shield others." It was not forgiveness. It was something harder, something that required Elias to stand taller than he ever had. And in the flicker of firelight, a fragile bond was struck. Marietta arrived before the dawn, carrying bread and water wrapped in cloth. She set them down without asking permission, as though her quiet defiance of the town's judgment mattered less than the fact that Elias and Chaska might not see another sunrise without her help. Her presence startled them both, yet steadied something unspoken between the three. In her eyes, Elias saw not pity but recognition, that she, too, bore shame pressed on her by others, and that her small act of grace was rebellion enough. The next day the mob thundered toward the canyon. Dust rose behind them like a storm, and torches burned against the daylight, a strange, savage brightness. Elias rode at their front, though not as their leader. He rode to where the trail narrowed, where the canyon opened, and there he reined in his horse, turning against them. His figure stood alone between the mob and the tribe waiting beyond. He said nothing, only set his rifle across the saddle, his eyes steady as stone. Murmurs broke out. Some called him traitor, others cursed his name. Still he did not move. Behind him, Chaska's people readied themselves, children held back by their mothers, warriors with faces painted in the colors of endings. It was Marietta who broke the spell. She stepped forward, her voice carrying more than the rifles pointed her way. "Look," she cried, holding up a lantern. "These fires, these raids, they are not theirs. Outlaws did this. Men who hide in shadow while you burn your neighbors alive in the light." Her words wavered the crowd. Doubt flickered, but doubt is fragile when fear is louder. The mob shifted, rifles lifting higher, and that was when the outlaws revealed themselves, gunfire cracking from the ridges, lead spitting into dust. Chaos erupted, swift and merciless. The valley became a storm of horses and smoke. Elias fired until his shoulder jolted numb, his rifle an extension of his will to stand between life and death. Beside him, Chaska loosed arrows with a silence that seemed to shame the noise of gunfire. The outlaws fell one by one, but not before blood soaked into the soil. Marietta shielded a child as bullets hissed past. She stumbled, the lantern falling from her hand, but Elias saw her and spurred forward, catching her against his saddle just as a shot tore through his shoulder. Pain seared hot, but he did not fall. Chaska's hand steadied him, pulling him upright in the saddle, their alliance sealed in blood and necessity. The outlaws lay broken when the smoke cleared. The mob, shamed and shaken, could no longer hold their fury. Torches dropped into the dust. Boots shuffled back toward town, their anger revealed for the cowardice it had been. When dawn came, the last tribe gathered their few belongings. Chaska met Elias' gaze, his bow slung across his back, his people moving quietly behind him. He said nothing, only placed a hand over his chest in farewell before turning away into the hills. The circle of their fires would burn elsewhere, their memory carried in silence. Elias remained, his arm bound by Marietta's care, his face pale but eyes alive. The town had no cheers for him, only silence. Yet silence can sometimes be cleaner than words. Marietta walked at his side as they returned, neither speaking, both carrying the weight of what they had chosen. And if you listen to that windmill on the hill, creaking slow against the sky, it will tell you what I will tell you now. In every life there comes a moment where a man or woman must decide if they will bend to the judgment of the crowd or to the whisper of their own soul. The West was built on such choices. So is every heart.